So I'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. Moving to adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Schmidt, seconded by Trustee Doman. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving to minutes of March 1st, open board meeting. I could have a mover by Trustee Schmidt, seconded by Trustee Doman. Any conversation? All those in favor? Motion carries. No recognition and delegations this evening. Report of closed meeting. Mr. Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you. At the closed meeting, the board dealt with two personnel issues. We're provided with an update on two property issues and had a policy discussion. The meeting has been recessed and will reconvene after the open meeting.
Thank you. Moving to item 6, old business action list. We've done it all. Is that? Well, thank you, staff. We have managed to have little on our action list at this point, so we move on. Moving to Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To begin with, on updates, a variety of things happening around the district, especially just prior to spring break. A couple that I'll bring to your attention. The Makerspace Maker Day event at Maple Bay Elementary. We have students from a few schools coming in, participating in a Maker Day. Thank you. There's some pictures. There you go. Which is really about design thinking. It's students going through a design thinking process. And again, it's often less about the product that they finally end up with, but the process they have learned to go through to identify problems, solve them, and use design thinking. It's available to see on Shaw TV. They did a little feature on it, as well as we can provide in the minutes a YouTube link to that as well. Pretty cool. And I think the beginning of maker and design conversations in our district. Thanks to the staff at Maple Bay, especially Craig McLeod, for getting that off the ground. And that was done through a grant that they applied for. Task program at Francis Kelsey. It's going in full swing. It's a one-term course in cooperation with Camosun and the South Island Partnership, where a number of students go down to Camosun College and participate in some construction projects there. It's on site at Kelsey 2 days a week and 7 days at Camosun College Interurban Campus for plumbing, pipe fitting, and sheet metal fabrication. Students are currently building 2 permanent outbuildings at Francis Kelsey. It's a dual credit opportunity, introduction to ACET programs, and they get certification in WIMIS, fall protection, and confined space entry certifications as well. So another great example of that kind of an opportunity for our kids. And the new Camosun facility at the Interurban campus is absolutely extraordinary. What's old is now new again, and Rubik's Cube inquiry. Grade 6 students at Alex Aiken explored the Rubik's Cube inquiry questions, because guess what? Rubik's Cubes are back. And cool, and who knew, but they are trendy once again. As you can see from the questions, kids designing cubes, making cubes, solving cubes, etc. Pretty nifty. Catalyst update, some things that are coming up. Secondary chess tournaments, district poetry slam, District Young Filmmakers Showcase, all coming up, those have happened. Youth Action Day is coming up later in the month on April 22nd at the Cowichan Theatre, and trustees, I believe you've had an email, are invited to attend. If you just let me know or let Cheryl know, we'll make sure that seats are provided for you there. The entire program is from 10 to 1 o'clock, and it's sort of a school district-based WE Day.
I think
Yeah, we
Trustee
did get-
DeGroot and I and maybe others, Trustee Schmidt, have all emailed Gino.
Okay, perfect.
I have.
Okay. It should be pretty cool. Cowichan secondary students did well at Skills BC regional competition. Electronics competitors, Trevor Ford won the gold medal from Cowichan secondary. He's going on to Abbotsford for the provincials, where he won silver last year at the provincials. Cowichan secondary students also won gold and silver in the automotive competition and gold in the junior skills gravity car competition. Again, pretty neat stuff. So lots going on in our schools. Lots of the things that people like the Yang Zhaos of the world would be talking about, our students should be doing exactly those kinds of things. So, pretty neat. I will also add, if I may, Syrian refugee update. Madam Chair, this morning there was nothing new to report other than a funding announcement, which was that the ministry has allowed us to include Syrian refugees students in the May count. So as they're coming in later, we're still able to access funding for them. However, as of about 1 o'clock this afternoon, we were informed that we have 3 new families instantly in town. They've come from Victoria and unable to find housing in Victoria, so they've relocated up to the Cowichan Valley. Family with 2 school-age children in the Duncan, North Cowichan area, and they will be a kindergarten student and a grade 2 student at Drinkwater. Second family has 3 school-age children, grade 6 student and a grade 7 student at Drinkwater, and a grade 10 student at Cowichan Secondary. And in Cobble Hill, South End, 5 school-age children, grade 1, grade 6, grade 7 for Bonner, and grade 10 and 11 for Francis Kelsey. And with those kinds of numbers, we will be needing to increase, looking very seriously at increasing ELL support. So, some good news, some students and a ability to access funds for those students. For board action, we have a field trip for you to approve. It's the second time you've seen this field trip to Chemainus Secondary Field Trip to Mount St. Helens, June 9th to 11th. And would ask that you approve that trip.
Moved by Trustee Hutchins, seconded by Trustee Schmidt. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, and one, I should have gone in the front files, pardon me, just because I know it's of interest to trustees. The final draft of the new website is under review now. The go live date, we're hoping for May 3rd. Testing April 18th to 30th. And before Trustee Croft asks me, we're anticipating the next meeting of the committee would be April 12th, but we'll confirm that. For them to look at, so that the committee can look at the latest information we have from the web designers. It looks amazing.
That is great. Trustee
Yeah.
Croft, would you like to say something?
Well, we just mean that we now have an actual deadline for all of you folks to submit your bios so that I can prepare them and put them online to those who haven't done so already.
All right,
I'll send an email.
thank you. So thank you. District sounds like it's working hard and doing well for our kids. Great. Moving to Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you. Under board information, we have the 16-17 funding announcement. So on March 15th, the district's funding was announced, and if you've been following along with the presentation of the board, business and education committee, or we're at the public meeting, we talked a lot about how the per pupil rate went up by $8 per student, and how that wasn't sufficient to fund the labor settlement increases that had been provincially negotiated for our staff. So what had occurred was there were 7,500 new students in summary that came into the district between September last year and estimated for the September coming up, and there was no additional money put into the education formula. So money was taken from the labor settlement funds to pay for increased kids in the province. So that was a bad news story that we were telling. As of last night, if we move on to the next slide, we had talked about how that shortfall in our presentation that we made to BBC and to the public meeting, that we thought we were short about $27 million in the formula to fund the enrollment growth, and BC School Trustees Association, I would say, took the lead on lobbying the province to come forward with those additional funds. And we had talked about how we felt we were about $400,000 short on our funding, and that had gone into the enrollment growth. So if you look at SD 79 on that line, there was an announcement last night, and they found two different ways to fund it. The first part is they're pulling money from the holdback, so that $211,899 figure is money that was currently in the education block but had not been allocated yet. So that was money that was on reserve for any more enrollment growth. So they may need to come back if there is further growth in the province at a later time to find additional funds. So, but they've taken from the holdback. The second part is new money. So that $183,000 is part of a $13 million grant that has been added to the block to fund the enrollment growth. So you add those two numbers together, and we are up $395,000 from where we were yesterday morning as far as our funding estimate for next year. So that's good. That's in scope with what we thought we were short and what we were talking about having been behind on our labor settlement funds in our earlier presentation. So those will be revised. So knowing that, we now would project our shortfall to have improved by $395,000, which puts us now at $3.27 million as our starting point from $3.665. Any questions around those funds?
Trustee Urchins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sandquist, is the $52 increase in pupil allocation, is that including the salary increase?
Part of the salary increment was the $8 that we had originally received. So this is a further 52, which is the $28 million divided by the number of students in the province, which is in the 550,000 range to get you $52 per student.
So you mean $60, 8 plus 52, or
Yes.
is it?
It's now $60. $60 is what we've improved from last year's funding per pupil rate to this year's per pupil rate.
And does that include the salary increase?
It does.
So 1% is $70, so $60 is less than 1%. And the inflationary rate for BC, is it less than 1%?
It, on the majority of our costs are staff related, and our collective agreements for next year, currently neither of the three collective agreements that we have, there aren't any that exceed 1% as the increase next year. So it is in step with the labor settlements.
Thank you.
Extremely confused.
Didn't sound
It is.
Oh, it's better. Oh,
Better the good news.
It's better.
it's better than what.
It's better.
It's
On your blotter is a year-end projection, and we, apologies for not having this out, this was completed this morning in time for this meeting, and we thought it was good to do this work now as we're in budget discussions, and if there are surplus funds, they can be considered into the balancing of the 16-17 budget. So if I walk you through this, I want to first highlight the very first line under provincial grants, where you see now that we're projecting some surplus in that account over what we originally had in our budget. And the reason for that is our February counts, particularly in our dual credit and our DL programs, came in very, very strong. So stronger than we had originally put in. But there's an offset to that. With additional students attending dual credit, we're paying additional tuition dollars. So when you see $252,000 coming in, it's not all clear profit. Our margins range in the 20% range, so expect there's 80% of that figure showing up in my overage on the services later on in this projection. The same as under our miscellaneous revenue, I also want to draw your attention to that line, which shows $248,000 as surplusing. And a good portion of that are fees for registration for ISP students that show up on a different line item than the tuition up above. So you see that we're under budget on the international program by $125,000. We're not really when you consider in the other fees that are down below in the miscellaneous revenue line. So those two really need to net off very much against each other, but we're still ahead. And so that shows that our total revenue is now expected to be $440,000 over budget, and part of that is $70,000, the bottom line in the revenue section, that we did not allocate into our budget from the prior year surplus. So we didn't need all of this 15-16 surplus to balance. A piece of that is rolling over. Looking at the principals, vice principals, and teacher salaries, we may have some coding issue here. We're showing that we're underspending on our principals, vice principals, and overspending on our teachers, but the net difference is that we're within about $31,000. So I suspect somebody in the system is driving to the wrong account, and I just need some time to figure out who that is. But when you look at those two pieces together, those two budgets together on just over $35 million, we're within $31,000 in our projection. That is extremely, extremely close on a budget that size. So down below that, education assistance, very close to budget. So we're going over budget by about $15,000 right now, and that's on $5.2 million, extremely close. Clerical, $9,000 on a $3.5 million budget, really close. We're on the wire with those. USW, doing quite well, and some of that is just the allocation of who's working on capital versus who's working in the operating budget, and that can change from month to month, but we're currently looking very good there. But I use current numbers in my extrapolation, and if we decide that we're going to do more maintenance and less capital work in the months coming, that figure goes down. And exempt salaries, again, very, very close to budget. So an interesting line item here to look at is our casual replacement. And there we're showing projected surplus of just over $300,000. So that may be an area when we're looking at next year's budget that we adjust somewhat. You know, if we have multiple years of surpluses, it's time to look at that budget to see whether or not we have too much set aside there. Still needing to realize that we occasionally have an H1N1 outbreak, and we need to make sure we have some sort of a buffer there to meet that. But you know, the big piece of that is on our, just to share with you, is on our education assistance, where we have currently a surplus of that $180,000 of that is on the EA replacement budget this year. So that's an area where, for whatever reason, it's doing very, very well this year as compared to the 3 previous years. But if you go back 4 years, it's consistent with that level. So I don't know if the last 3 years were a blip and we're back to a norm, or if this is a blip and the norm is the last 3 years and should be higher. But it's contributing a lot of money to the surplus projection. Other item on our in-service, the last time I brought this projection, I assumed that those budgets would be fully spent. So if you're looking at a $656,000 budget and we're 70% of the way through the year and have spent $319,000, I've now made an assumption that they won't be fully spent. So with 3 months to go, this is our department heads. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. It's not just in service. It's just release time in general. It may not all be spent. So I'm thinking that with 3 months, you won't be able to do what you did in 7 months. So I put some money in the surplus there. It's looking at the bottom line on employee benefits. If you have surplus in your wage accounts, you should have surplus in your benefit accounts because they're typically tied as a percentage of wages. And then going down, under services, this is where I'm showing an over expenditure of $420,000. So a big piece of that is the tuition on the dual credit program. That's driving the reason we have more revenue in the upper section. So another piece of that is on our software costs, which are exceeding our budget this year. So we had to do some emergent work with our school-based accounting system. As you might recall, over the summer it failed, and there's some costs related to that. And under student transportation, when the international program arranges for a field trip and they charge for that, the expenses come out of student transportation. When you're dealing with the transport of those students, the revenues are up above. So there are some negatives here that have compensating revenues in the revenue section, so they don't really, they net each other. And the other area that I want to highlight here down at the very, very bottom is in our utilities, where I think we all know we had a pretty nice winter in general as far as temperature goes, and in particular our natural gas has been very, very, very good this year for heating our schools, and this is showing we're going to generate a surplus there of about $178,000 this year. And again, that's another one of those areas that if you trim it, that might be the year that you have snow and cold. But it's been a good year, and the last 2 years have been good years, but the years before are much closer to our budget. So the bottom line on the projection, assuming that, of course, we haven't received our February count confirmation yet, so I've made those assumptions that all those students that were in that February count are funded at the provincial rates, is that our surplus last month was in the $500,000 range. Now that we had the February count, I moved it up to, now we're in the $840,000 range. So those are funds that we could draw on to assist in balancing next year's budget. Some of those funds, because again, it's a projection, it hasn't happened, but it is showing that we should expect some surplus this year due to, and I will just say we were at $500,000 last month, we moved to $844. The big piece of that was the strong February count.
This is great news as well.
Well, it is.
Anything.
It is, and the reason we brought it tonight was we know we're in budget discussions and we needed to work on this. It'll be confirmed when we get the February count. We could really lock down, but we'll have that before the end of the budget cycle.
Any questions from trustees? Thank you for all that work. No, a note of optimism. Thank you.
Next item is just to inform the board that over spring break we had $29,000 released from the ministry in capital funding, and typically capital funding comes to the board for a bylaw and for approval before the ministry provided to us. But I suspect that they wanted this capital funding out on their fiscal, and we had done some architectural work on the building envelope project that's coming up at Mount Prevost, so it was funded ahead of a formal bylaw process, or without a formal bylaw process. So just for information, wanted to let the board know that that project is kind of moving along, and according to our operations department, that budget's going to be somewhere between 2.4 3.2 million to facilitate that project out at Recall Mount Prevost. and they're expecting to have drawings ready for tender sometime around the middle of June. So, for information.
Thank you. Any questions from trustees, comments? Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move into the annual facilities grant, and I invited Lonnie Schermerhorn and Monroe Grove to the meeting so that they could go over the plan. So before you approve the bylaw, there has been approval, the ministry has given us our AFG allocation for next year, and part of our submission is to let them know what we're going to spend it on. So I'd like to invite Monroe and Lonnie to now walk through the project list, and then we can move into the bylaw.
I'll just give you one face to look at. So Lonnie's the architect of the plan, so I'll just sit for a bit. And jump in. Thank you.
So you're looking at the 2016-17 AFG plan. You'll notice right up to the top it's called Plan A. This plan goes all the way up to Z ultimately, but this is the plan as it stands as of today. A large proportion of this plan you'll see is district-wide initiatives, and those are line items that we use to take care of generic issues that arise across the district every year. But we have singled out projects for individual schools, which some of which are emergent and others have been on our project list for a period of time, and we need to address them this year. We don't really have a lot of choice. Coming back to the point that Jason just made, there is an allocation within the AFG this year, a contribution toward the building envelope project at Mount Provo. There is some re-roofing that needs to be done there, and it's a more effective use of our funds to tie it in with the building envelope project, which also has some roofing. So we can take advantage of better economies in providing some of our AFG money into the project. The interesting thing about this plan this year, I don't know if you're aware, but the ministry has recently announced that there's a $40 million school enhancement program fund available, and we are in the process of working towards submissions of about $900,000 worth of deferred maintenance and school improvement projects that we're going to be submitting for funding. 7 of those projects are actually on this list. I think we need to address them this year, and in fact we need to address them now. So when we make the submissions, the submission deadline is April 15th, and we will have confirmation of funding May 30th. So we will have to proceed with some of these projects even though we have submitted them for school enhancement funding in an interim basis, and then make whatever kind of adjustments later, depending on what is approved. If everything that we submit that's on this year's plan is approved, we already have $595,000 of alternate projects to slide into this plan. So what that means essentially is the AFG plan will not actually be set until after the end of the first week of June. We have to submit this for your consideration and also to the ministry for approval in the interim form. And virtually every school district in the province is in the same boat this year because of that staggered approval timing.
Thank you.
Any specific questions about projects that I can answer?
Trustees, any questions? It's great to see that our buildings will be upgraded just here and there because we know how important that is to not only our kids but staffs and the communities. So it's wonderful to see that we have some money to invest in doing that.
Yes, the school enhancement funding is going to ultimately, I think, be a big boon for us. We're having quite some trouble keeping up with the maintenance of our facilities, and $40 million that's available province-wide. If it were distributed equitably based on student population, we would be eligible for about $600,000 of that this year.
Thank you. Mr. Sandquist and then Trustee Hutchins.
Oh, I think it's exciting that the province has the routine capital program now in place. It's how we got the funding for Paulson's building envelope project, and I hope we get our $600,000 share or more.
We've got a great after photo of Paulson I can show you after the board meeting. It looks terrific.
Thank you. Trustee Hutchins.
I'm not sure who should answer this question, but when we see for Alex Aiken, enlarge and upgrade main washroom to handicap standard completion, $5,000, is that just materials or is that labor as well?
That's labor and materials. There was just a small adjustment we need to make, and we weren't able to do that while classes were in session, so we'll probably be doing that this summer.
And would all this work that's listed here be done by our own staff?
The majority of it will, yes. Whatever we can handle with our own forces, we would do.
So those trades that are on our staff are actually paid through additional capital funds?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Roughly half our crew is paid through capital funding.
Thank you.
Anything further from anyone? Okay, well, thank you so much, Lonnie
You're welcome.
and Monroe. Appreciate your work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving back to the grant approval. Yes, so, Mr. Sandquist.
So, in order to get the money from the ministry, the AFG funds are broken into two components. There's an operating piece, which will come in just through our regular grant allocation, and that'll be expected to arrive shortly. But we also need to do a capital project bylaw for about 80% of our funds, and that is what's before you here now. So in order to start receiving funds for these projects, before you have the AFG Capital Bylaw 127113 for 2016-2017 in the amount of 1454836.
And the mover for first reading is Trustee Schmidt, seconded by Trustee DeGroot. There is no discussion on the first reading, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously.
And I'd like to ask that the Board of Education give second reading to Capital Project Bylaw 127113 Annual Facilities Grant 2016-2017 in the amount of $1,454,836.
Thank you, Mr. Sandquist. Moved by Trustee DeGroot, seconded by Trustee Thorne. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And back to you, Mr. Sandquist.
And a bylaw is normally considered over 2 meetings. So for the purposes of accelerating this bylaw and obtaining these funds sooner than the next board meeting, we would like to request that the Board of Education consider 3 readings of Capital Project Bylaw 127113 Annual Facility Grant 2016-2017 in the amount of $1,454,836 at this meeting.
Moved by Trustee Schmidt, seconded by Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you. And now I'd like to ask that the Board of Education gives third and final reading to Capital Project Bylaw 127113 Annual Facility Grant 2016-2017 in the amount of $1,454,836.
Thank you, Mr. Sandquist. Moved by Trustee DeGroot, seconded by Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving to item 9, committees and outside organizations. The first is Provincial Council meeting. Mr. Trustee Hutchins.
Great report, so move receipt.
Thank you. Moved by Trustee Hutchins, seconded by Trustee Dolan. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving to item B of the Board Education and Business Committee. Moving back to Trustee Hutchins.
Answer is no recommendations for consideration. Move receipt.
Moving, Mr. Trustee Hutchins with receipt of the minutes, seconded by Trustee DeGroot. Any comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving to item C, Vista Conference. And simply to tell you the bottom line, although all of you were in attendance, thank you for that. In terms of the overall meeting, we have had the highest number of trustees attend any VISTA meeting ever. So that was 66 attended, although we had, I think, almost 69 or 70 registered. But the amount of people who were able to be here in the end was 66, plus we had guests. So I'm sure that you enjoyed it all as much as the comments I heard from the other trustees. The budget was absolutely perfect. Thank you, Gina, for all that work. And the reason why I think we had so many attend, and because and why we had so many positive comments, was our staff. We really appreciated all the people from our staff who not only attended but gave the presentations, and they were absolutely super. So, all right, moving on to 9D, highlights from the DSAC meeting. Trustee Schmidt, please.
The Board of Education received highlights from the March 9th, 2016 DSAC meeting.
Thank you. Moved by Trustee Schmidt, seconded by Trustee DeGroot. Any comments, questions? All those in favor? Motion carries. Back to business arising from the BEDC meeting. Trustee Hutchins.
There was no business.
Yeah, there's a motion there that was going to brought forward.
Board evaluation.
I don't have.
Okay, the motion was that the Board of Education requests staff to explore board evaluation and superintendent assessment tools used in other districts.
So moved.
Assuming you moved. Seconded by
must have
Trustee
missed.
Schmidt. Well, technology is not
Okay.
always helpful. Okay, so a motion on the table. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving to upcoming meetings and events schedule on page 26. Questions or additions, changes? Looks like we'll be busy with budget. Okay, moving on to correspondence, none, new business, board strategic priorities, and they are attached as we have discussed our priorities for our term in office. What do we want to see accomplished? The attachment is there for us to think about and put you on notice of motion that at the next meeting we would be looking to approve them as this board's direction for the next couple of years in terms of their priorities. Trustee Hutchins?
So if we wanted to make some recommended changes, how do we do that?
At the next meeting.
Thank you. Just a couple.
Just a couple changes?
Well, I'm not sure everything together. We are, say, empowering smaller farmers today. What a great mission.
Missed that
Thank
meeting.
you for the input. We'll discuss it next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything people want to say? Anything particular about tonight, or actually this afternoon? Okay, then it'll be back on the table for final review at the next meeting. Question period. Oh, good. Oh, Trustee Schmidt.
Oh, I was just getting ready for your next question.
Oh, okay, motion to adjourn. Trustee Schmidt, seconded by Trustee DeGroot.
And recess into closed session. Or no, and
Into
reconvene.
Okay, so motion on the table to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor, motion carries. We will reconvene for closed session in about 3 minutes? Okay, perfect, thank you.